Nietzsche basically said God is dead. Richard Dawkins said any rational human being with the intellectual honesty they have would say God doesn't exist. However, he did mention that he's a cultural Christian. In the West, where religion is falling, people resort to drugs and casual hookups. They get plagued by this idea of meaninglessness. It's pretty much the same in the East because of globalization and industrialization. People are starting to realize that science, maybe it's trumping religion, the validity of a transcendental being that is omnipotent and omniscient. It's not logically possible. However, even the East, just like the West, are resorting to less meaningful relationship. They are resorting blank hedonism with a void that they can't fill up. This problem was predicted by Friedrich Nietzsche. He said that in order to combat this meaninglessness crisis, we ought to be an Ubermensch and create our own values and meanings. However, Friedrich Nietzsche assumed that we are all intellectually smart. We can create our own meaning with no backings. This is impractical. My solution is to create our own God. Let me just explain the premise. First of all, we got this world to live. Imagine it as survival instinct. We have, let's say, 1 million time points in a day, and we have lived 25 years of our life. So that's like 25 fucking trillions of time points where you chose to keep on living despite knowing the meaninglessness of life. That means it's rational to assume that the remaining 25, 50, 75 years of your life, you'll keep on choosing to keep on living. So with that premise being said, regardless of having meaning or not, you're still going to keep on living. But as history and the current state of the world shows, meaninglessness has caused too much chaos, too much blank hedonism, too much void and abyss of emotions that has a net negative outcome. So we ought to have a solution. It's like this curse of knowledge. Once you know that lightning is caused by clashings of electrons in the clouds, we can't go back to the idea that God is angry, is furious at our own sins. That's why they punish us by striking us with lightning. We know that that is not true. The same way how a lot of non-religious people have this curse of knowledge that God, it's logically and materialistically impossible. My solution is to be a God ourselves and create a God for us to worship. Here's my logical flow. And by the way, if you're interested right now, thank you for Science Coherence for saying the last video was interesting. Please follow. I'll call you daddy. Little Daniel philosophies. Logic flow is like this. If you can do something, God, it's omnipotent, so he can do anything possible. And some would even argue things that are logically impossible, but irregardless, he can do anything supposedly because he's omnipotent. And because we as humans can open this earphone case, can drink a cup of water, a bottle of water, I can smell, I can tell you to subscribe to Little Daniel Philosophy. I can do some things. God can do anything. So to an extent, we can do what God can do, at least part of what he can do. So that means we are partly godly. I'll repeat again, we are partly godly. And if you have religious belief, don't view it as a religious blasphemy, but a new metaphysical theological perspective that you should disagree with. If we're partly godly, then why can't we create our own God? Knowing that will to live will cause you in the next 50 years, 100 years, to keep on choosing to living irregardless of meaninglessness, why not embrace woeful delusion? But since the curse of knowledge of the validity of an actual literal God is too much, it's better for us to just woefully delude ourselves into saying, because at least it needs to base on some sort of logical arguments. We can just woefully delude ourselves into saying that we can do what partly God can do. So we are partly godly. And since a literal God can't exist, then why not we ourselves be the first mover in creating a God for us to worship? And the great distinction here is that I'm not saying a literal God, but this idea of a transcendental being that we can worship, a transcendental being that we create ourselves to worship. When the religion of a literal God fails, we fall under this religion of money, this religion of power, this religion of fame, this religion of social recognition. We fall into this epidemic of religion of something measurable, something quantifiable. And when our morals clash with these quantifiable things, we can easily choose the latter, and this will make morals and honor fall. And in a large-scale society, not on an individual level, but on a macro scale, if every single person would just worship something quantifiable and let go of certain honors and morality, everyone would be lying, would be cheating on each other. The net benefit of the general society would be lower. So we have to lie to ourselves to have a transcendental being that is non-quantifiable in order to woefully lie to ourselves, in order to retain moral, retain honor, in order for the general flourishment of a large-scale society. So with the premise of will to live, with the premise that we want to preserve the general flourishment of large-scale society, with the premise that the curse of knowledge forbids us from having a literal God, we ought to utilize woeful delusion in creating our own God, transcendental God, to worship in order to combat this meaninglessness, to combat this moralless society, and restore honor and moral. This has been Little Daniel Philosophy here. If you really find this interesting, please follow. I am so desperate for views and followers because I still worship this religion of quantifiable numbers. Have a good day. Please subscribe or else I'll cry in the corner later. Bye bye.